these are the guys who are like probably taking on some of the toughest lifestyle challenges of all guys. And, bringing like, hey, this is what you're going to face as a guy. How are you going to handle it? How tough are you going to be? And, I had a background doing some prison ministry for a stint. And like, that was the thing is like everybody, if you was respect and toughness. And how do you define toughness? And it's like, it's not always taking the easy way out. And the easy way out is fighting, drinking, a lot of times it's like doing the hard thing is being tough. And so that's one of the biggest things that we try to teach is like, what does it mean to be tough spiritually as well?
Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners, on today's episode, we have Andy Holmes, which he's got a long title here for his initial job, and then he's got the coolest title I've ever heard. So this is going to be I think this is the most engaging title introduction we've ever had on the podcast. But he's the business development manager for the Americas for Informed Sport and Informed Choice, which is the long extended title, obviously. And then the cool title is he's the Strength Chaplain for Ottawa University. So Andy, thank you so much for coming on, man. I'm stoked to speak with you.
Connor, thanks for having me, man. It's great to be here. I just appreciate you asking me to be on here. It's pretty humbling, and I think it's great to be here.
Well, it was easy for me, right? Because, you were actually, I think you were the first person I spoke to at the conference that I hadn't previously met, right? Obviously when you set up at CSCCA, there's going to be some people that you see year in, year out. Obviously I know the Samson guys, and then, you came over to the table and we started speaking and just hearing about your story and what you do. And a lot of the things with being a strength chaplain, I was like, we have to get you on the podcast. And so it's finally come to fruition, and we get to, see exactly what you do. And I'm excited for our listeners to find out.
Yeah, I have to go to those conferences every year. And so like, I can't stay in the booth very long. So I'm always like, running around, seeing what everybody's doing and what everybody has at their booth and stuff. And no, I always go by Samson. So like, but no, I've been a big fan of Samson's equipment for a long time. So I always go by you guys.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. And I know everybody at Samson appreciates that too. And so now it's exciting to get to speak with you. I'm a fan of you. So we're fans of each other at this point. It's going to work out pretty well. But
that'll work out great.
Yeah, exactly. Can you just give us your background? I know you've got an extensive athletic background, and then kind of your path into strength and conditioning, and also working with Informed Sport, and what leads you to Ottawa University.
Sure. Well, my background is I was born and raised in Western Nebraska, in a place where there's more cattle than there are people. My family's got a background in raising cattle for about 100 years. And so, it's kind of an interesting background compared to maybe a lot of other backgrounds out there, because you learn a lot of different things being by yourself and relying on self-reliance, things like that. And I had really good folks who, kind of poured into me and encouraged me, especially in athletics. My parents really were behind me. I think they were excited because it kept me out of the bars and stuff like that. So they were all about it. Went to college, ended up participating in 3 sports, and then that kind of led into an opportunity later in life to, to participate in 2 sports after that. And, from those, experiences, I got to, do a lot of things athletically, which kind of opened up my eyes to like, it's not all about one thing. And you got to meet a lot of different people, different perspectives, different training, different ways people recovered, things like that. And, you just are exposed to so much more, and you also get a lot of coaches. And like, I hate to say this, but there's a lot more bad coaches than there are good coaches. So
you're right. You're right.
And like, I was always going through, I remember going through college and going, man, if I was ever a coach, this is the way I was going to be, and like this and that. And then, those are people too. And so, it's kind of interesting, on this side of it, you give an opportunity to kind of do it the way you want to do it, and, kind of learn from those experiences. And then, from that background, I had an extensive background in athletics. And so I knew about the anti-doping scene, because you were drug tested and all that kind of stuff. And then I did a stint as a military contractor, so I knew that. And then, I just had worked in the sports nutrition industry, in different capacities. And a buddy of mine called me and said, "Hey, LGC Science, which probably no one's heard of, is it's a very large multi-billion-dollar company out of Great Britain, out of the UK, and they own the world's largest anti-doping third-party certification called Informed Sport and Informed Choice. They said they're hiring a guy, they're looking for a guy to handle the United States, and they said, and they asked me, do you know anybody? I said, you're the only guy I'd recommend. So I went and interviewed, and 10 years later, I'm still doing it. So, that's a whole chapter right there, just cause that's a weird job. Cause like everyone's like, oh, you're an anti-doping. What's that mean? And you kind of get to see stuff and hear stuff that you're like, I didn't even know this went on. As an athlete, I remember taking creatine and being like, oh, it's just crazy. It's not that big a deal, but it starts to become a big deal. So.
Absolutely. I mean, no joke. I mean, I wanted to speak with you about this. I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I always kind of just thought like supplements are supplements, and
Yeah.
there's going to be some that are a little bit higher quality, and there's going to be some that have a little bit more bioavailability, whatever it may be. And my wife is a dietitian. So like,
Oh,
I
no
never
way.
even,
Okay.
yeah,
I
I
didn't know
never
that.
even, yeah. We
Yeah.
actually work at the same university. So
Oh,
we get to
very
see each
cool.
other every day. Yeah. But I always knew that, supplementation can be important. It can help, complete what you need from an athletic perspective and from your nutrition perspective. And I was just kind of thought like, well, I'll go with kind of the trusted brands, but it's not a big deal if I deviate every once in a while. And then I remember speaking attending a conference where Lauren Link, the dietitian for Purdue University, was speaking. And she showed me the statistics and literally just went through about how many different supplements that are not third party tested have banned substances in them, trace amounts or even large amounts. And it's just crazy to me how out of control that can get. So I guess my first question for you is really like, what is the importance of third party testing? Because I know some strength coaches here may not be able to fully grasp it. Can you just break it down for us?
Well, like when you say third party testing, it could mean anything from like they're testing for heavy metals or they're testing for like pesticides or junk like that. Like we verify that kind of stuff's being done, but like what we do is really specialized testing, which is we're looking for drugs. We're looking for banned substances that are on the WADA list. So that could be steroids, methamphetamine compounds, beta blockers, masking agents, all kinds of fun tricks, all that kind of stuff. So, and everyone's like, what do you mean there's testosterone in this? What? And they're like, how could that be? And, there's a lot of like, methamphetamine compounds out there, and how it works is like, you could have raw materials being made in China, and let's say they're making Connor and Andy's protein over there, and they're sending the raws over here to be packaged. Well, before they made our protein, they made Sudafed, and so some dude, goes over there and air hoses it out, and all right, throw the protein in. They don't care, and so it gets over here, and you don't even know it's in there. The manufacturer doesn't know, and it ends up in the product. Another place it gets in there is through the manufacturing process. You have poor manufacturers that don't have good standard operating procedures. They're not taking care of that kind of stuff from a manufacturing standpoint. To they got banned substances in the facility. I like I got this guy yelled at me one time because we're like, dude, we can't certify your stuff, and he's like, well, why not? And I go, well, you have ephedrine in your place. And he's like, so? And I go, dude, does it run on the same machine that this liquid collagen you want to get? And he goes, well, yeah, but we clean it. And I go, mm-mm.
Not how
I
that
was like,
works.
no, it doesn't work like that, bro. I was like, and he goes, well, we're really good. We do this. And I go, mm-mm, no, sorry. And I was like, that's a deal breaker. And he was so mad. But I was like, dude, I go, like, the way I look at it is, you know, that's another way, banned substances can get in there. And like why it matters, like if you're a strength coach or like your wife who's a dietitian, you have responsibility over these athletes. And a lot of times, unfortunately, what they're taking, they'll whatever you put in front of them, they'll take. And so now over the last 10 years, it's become a lot more litigated. So if an athlete tests hot, they're going to test everything that kid has. And then they're going to find out where it's at. And they're like, where did you get this? Oh, well, my strength coach gave it to me, or my dietitian gave it to me. And they're going to be like, oh, well, let's just name him in the lawsuit that my parents are cooking up with their lawyer, because they're going to sue the school. They're going to sue the athletic department. They're going to sue the, strength coach or the dietitian or anybody. And so there's a lot more at risk, and it matters more because as we see sports grow, there's more money in sports. And so there's more at risk. And so what we do is we mitigate that risk. And like, to kind of give you an idea, we do we'll pull a bunch of products from different regions of the world. And I don't care where you're at, Europe, Australia, here in the US, it's about 1 in 10. 1 in 10 non-third party tested products has something that could cause you to fail a drug test.
It's just crazy to me. I
I
can't
know.
believe that, but it's true. It's a true statement.
Yeah, I always tell dietitians, if I talk to them, I say, if you and I go to Walmart together and we go shopping, and we go down that aisle that has all that, supplements in there, and we just dump 10 in there, and I go, we'll test 10, 1 in 10 will have something that'll cause one of your athletes to fail. And that's a big deal. And the other thing too, if you look at it, we're protecting the athlete because, they spent their whole life trying to do this. I remember Dexter Lawrence, who's playing for Syracuse, he got busted for, I think it was Austrian or something, and this is all public, so I can say this, but he got busted and he didn't get to play in the SEC title game. Well, think about that. He's an all pro or all conference or all whatever defensive tackle. Well, if you don't get to play, do you think the odds change? Heck yeah, they do.
Yeah.
And so it's for a kid, you got to be responsible for not only yourself, but for your team. I bet he wanted to play. You can't. Sorry. You should have thought about that. And, I think he ended up getting drafted in the 5th round anyway, but still.
It worked out, but you don't get to play in one of the biggest games of your life,
Yeah, you missed out. And so, and then I think 2 years ago, the third string dude for the Saints, he popped top for something, and he got, I can't remember how much. I think he was suspended for 3 games. It cost him it was over $500,000 or something. I got to look, but I was out a lot of money, more money than I got. So I was that I was just dang, that kind of stinks. So
it matters. Like you said, that's exactly why it matters. And, like you said, all these people put all this time and energy into, trying to be as safe as possible and trying to be at the peak of their performance. And sometimes it's just small things that can completely affect your life and change the course of it. Right. And, ultimately with the interviews with the NFL process and, with the NBA, I know how some of those interviews go. I've talked to people who've been in them and they care about that stuff, right? If they know if you tested positive, and even if it was a supplement that had trace amounts of, X ingredient or compound, whatever it is, they know that, okay, well, this person may not be as responsible as we thought he was, it changes how people perceive you. And, it's tough to handle. And it's funny you bring up, just with the athlete and the collegiate level, because with the NCAA rules of creatine, right? I can't purchase the creatine for the athletes. And so the athletes have to purchase the creatine themselves. And every single time I send them direct links to literally supplements that are only third-party tested by Informed Sport. And I say, you can only buy this. Do not buy anything else. And then if I could find a contract that legally said, I told you for a fact not to buy anything other than this supplement, because at some point, like you said, at 1 out of 10, somebody's going to test positive for something. And it's happened continuously.
Well, and that's the whole thing with NIL, because NIL is oh, hey, look, I can make money off of this and they're going to give me free product. Well, is that product tested? No. Well, then what do you do? Because as a school, you can't keep them from making money, but it's almost they have to make these little contracts that are hey, we're not liable for what you're doing. But then the other thing too is, let's say it does test hot, you don't get to play in the game. So it hurts the school no matter what. And so we do a little thing on the side. We do, we have an NIL custom testing program. So if a school like wants to, let's say they have an athlete that's being approached by a company that's not doing testing, and the athlete wants to take that stuff, we'll test it for like a really reduced rate, like below half of what it really costs. And we'll try to get the brand to pay for it. And that way, that one lot, like that one lot of creatine, let's say, is tested. And so he can only pull out of that lot because we know that's been tested. But any of the other lots he can't have. And so what we'll do is we'll try to work with that brand and get them certified. But like that's the biggest problem with NIL. Like there's all kinds of junk out there. You know, those guys are just that's the wild, wild west right now. It's like a I want to say $2.79 billion market is NIL.
Yeah, and I've seen it firsthand because I mean, I remember this is again being married to a dietitian. This helps to have a story for this right now, right? But
Yeah,
we
right.
had right when NIL started, we had a local company reach out to some of our athletes and said, "Hey, we want to do an NIL deal with you." And they didn't, you know, none of the athletes came by this because again, this is right when it first started, so we didn't have the system of kind of checks and balances in place, and so these athletes signed up for it, started taking their supplements. And then immediately my wife like was in a one-on-one consultation with one of the, athletes. And they basically said, yeah, I signed a deal with this supplement company, local and I'm taking these. And it was like, ridiculous amounts of like caffeine and taurine and like a bunch of different things that they could test positive for. And so she went back to the actual company themselves and said, hey, are you third party testing anything? Like, is anything legitimate essentially with what you're doing? And they're like, well, no,
No.
does that really matter? And it's like, yeah, it matters a lot actually.
Yeah,
And
man.
so it happens all the time. And then we had to actually set up a full, if you have an NIL deal, you have to, bring it to the school, immediately tell them what it is. If it's anything related to nutrition, our dietitian has to approve it and make sure that it's positive, and that it's a positive outcome for you as well too, because like you said, it affects their money and it affects the school's money too.
Yeah, and it's just like it's just better like to like instill that kind of like, hey, look, you're different. And like you just got like you can't be like your buddy. You just can't roll into Walmart and take anything off the shelf. You gotta look. And that's just part of it. It's part of the responsibility of being a collegiate athlete. Like, and that's just if you don't want to do that, then fine. You don't have to, but you ain't gonna play here. So that's
Well,
just it's either or type of deal.
it's a good lesson in ownership, right? Which we are going to talk about some of the other lessons that you teach here soon, because I could spend all day talking about the third party testing. I know you got a lot of fun stories with that, but I really have to make sure we get into the strength chaplain piece of this, because we mentioned this before the episode. You said, I think I'm the only strength chaplain in the nation. I said, I'm pretty sure that's the world, right?
The world, yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, I want to know, like, essentially, what is a strength chaplain? How did you kind of get into this position, and what do you do on a daily basis?
Yeah. So okay, so Strength Chaplain came about because well, like I had a death of a family member. My dad passed away, and I was in Arizona, and out of nowhere, a school approached me through connections. It wasn't really out of nowhere. They, some friends of a friends of a friends, they said, hey, we really, you should meet my dad. I go, who's your dad? And he's told me, and he's like, oh, he's a professor. And, long story short, I ended up getting a scholarship to go to seminary. And, and I'm, knee deep in seminary right now. And I wanted to do something that was completely different than my regular job. But I also wanted to do something that would, something I could give back and I think would be valuable to people just the way like my folks were valuable to me. And also I think this is something that God was kind of pulling at my heart to do because, I kind of didn't know why I found this stuff interesting because a lot of people are like, oh man, I don't want to study any theology or anything like that. So, but like I found it interesting. So anyway, I ended up getting a scholarship to go to this seminary. And so it's a great seminary, very old, very established, but they called TCM and Training Christian Ministries Institute. They're a great organization, but they I was doing that, and then I was at the CSCCA, and this kid came up to me. He's older than me, I think, but anyway, he came up to me and he goes, what do you guys do here? And I was like, oh, well, I'm with Informed Sport. We do this, we do that. And And I go, well, where are you from, man? He goes, oh, I'm from Ottawa University. Or no, first thing he goes, oh, I'm from a small little university. You probably wouldn't know it. And I go, nah, try me. I didn't know where he was from. So like, he goes, have you ever heard of Ottawa University? I go, yeah, I know Ottawa University. It's like 5 minutes from my house. And he goes, what? And so I go, I know who you are. And he goes, you do? And I go, yeah. I go, you guys are Christians. I heard that. And he goes, what? And I go, yeah, you guys are Christian guys. And he's like, how do you know that? And I go, I met a dude on the golf team. He told me. And, and he started laughing. And he goes, dude, who are you? And I said, and I explained who I was. And he goes, man, and we started talking about our background. Well, he found out my background. He said, hey, you know what? If you ever want, stop by the facility. I'd love to give you a tour. Well, little did I know that him and his little staff had an idea. They were like, oh, free help, They're like, let's get this guy on staff. So they got me on staff and they said, look, we really appreciate you, having a background of strength and conditioning and knowing what to do and being, an asset like that. But what we really need is we need someone to bring a spiritual component into the weight room, because we're getting kids from all over the country. We're NAIA, so we're going to get kids who come out of Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, but from all over with all kinds of different backgrounds. And sometimes there's a reason they're in NAIA, like that, like, why did you have to transfer? Have to is a good, what's going on here? What's your background? Why, how's, all these things. And what I found, and I said, I had no idea what I was signing up for. I was like, yeah, this sounds awesome. I can do this. And I said, well, how do you want to structure this? And they go, oh, you're going to be the strength chaplain. And I go, what's a strength chaplain? He goes, I don't know. I just made it up. So, and he goes, but you're it. And I was like, okay. So what I do is I'm in the weight room as a strength and conditioning assistant coach and, coaching them and everything that a strength coach would do. But on the side, what I'm doing is I'm speaking to them about their faith. And, I'm a born again Christian, so I come at it from a Christian faith. And, and that's well received no matter what the faith background is, because there's a lot of things that from that Christian faith that like correlate with strength and conditioning. And I work exclusively with the football team. And like, man, the NAIA is like, I don't want to say it's no rules, but it's a little different than the NCAA. We'll have like 150 to 200 kids on our football team. Yeah. Like we had like 200 kids last year, and they all know me. Yep. Yeah. They all know me. And I'm like, everybody's, I got to figure out what everybody's name is and remember. And do I remember all 200? No. But like, if I don't, I get mad and I start looking at the roster and trying to find the kid. But, no, it's one of those things where like, you're not only working out them physically, but you're correlating like the difficulty of training and exerting that effort, definitely, probably the struggle of getting stronger and faster and bigger and working towards a goal is a good correlation to life as with Christ. But like a lot of times we get guys who come to us and they're like, I don't have any faith background. I don't want anything. I don't need one. I don't, whatever, and I'm just like, and those are the best guys, because it's funny because even the guys who, don't have any faith background, they like you. And they like me because they don't owe me anything. I care about them beyond football, beyond the weight room. How's your school going? Do you have a job? How's your mom? I remember like, oh, my mom's going through dialysis, or this is going on. My parents are getting divorced, or, hey, my girlfriend's pregnant, or something like that. You're dealing with all these things, but you come alongside them as like, not like as someone that's a coach, but someone that like, hey man, like, I don't care if you're the starter or your sixth string, like you're valuable. Your value is beyond the game you play. And so I look at them like that. And so what's interesting is they eat that up. And I have a hidden secret is I don't look like a chaplain. The head coach, the football coach, he brought me up one time into his office and he goes, "Hey, man." And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "You don't look like a chaplain." And I was like, looked at him. I go, "I'm not that kind of chaplain." And he started laughing. He goes, "Oh, no." And so, but the thing is he told me one time, he goes, "That's good for you because they've never had," most of the guys come from backgrounds where like a guy that's very, like a guy, like strong, athletics guys that they can relate with have never poured into him or give him anything like, "Hey, good job," or give him some kind of praise. It's always come from, say, like their mother or grandmother, things like that, where if you have a guy who's pouring into you sincerely, beyond like you matter more than this sport. That's really rare. And it has a real good effect, and it's a positive effect, which then leads to being able to talk to them about the gospel and talking to them about like, hey, this is how Christ fits into your life. And which is great because they come with questions. And that's that, as long as you can get them talking, in my opinion, that's the number one thing. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, no, 100%. And
Okay.
I want to just, for our listeners, very much clarify that you do not look like a regular chaplain. I can promise you that. If you are a great spokesperson for the title Strength Chaplain, because I remember when I first met you, I was like, this guy is absolutely yoked. And then I found out you worked for Informed Sport, and I was like, great. So he's not on TRT, and he's just that much better looking than me. And then immediately afterwards, you said you were the Strength Chaplain, and I was like, well, this is incredible. I mean, I thought it was fantastic because you're right. I think back to my Catholic school. I went to a Catholic high school, and I think back to a lot of our fathers who, were around, and they, obviously spent a lot of their time, studying or, devoted to their faith. And it didn't feel like a lot of them spent their time on the physicality aspect. But then, like you said, there's a lot of connections between the physicality and between the faith-based teachings that you can, kind of communicate. And so I think you serve a really good purpose of having a good segue between that, because you know what it's like to train hard, but you also know what it's like to live a hard life, and then to fall into your faith, and then be able to use that as something to help you progress further in life too. So I think it's great, and I think it's the most appropriate title I think I've ever seen for anybody in my life.
Well, I appreciate it. It's kind of funny. Like kids are real honest, and I'm sure everybody's listening who works with kids know that they're like, and like one of the hardest guys, like the guys who come from the street, or the guys who are just like, "Hey, man, I'm an atheist because I just don't want to deal with it," or something. They tell me like the stuff that they really believe, and a lot of them are like, "Hey, man, I just don't want to be fake." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Tell me about that." And they're like, "Man, I know if I give my life to Christ or I do something like that, I can't be perfect. I can't, like, man, I struggle with porn. I'm sleeping with my girlfriend. I'm smoking weed or whatever it is." And I was like, "Oh, you thought this was like you thought this was like a magic wand, like you were going to be perfect all of a sudden." And I said, I always tell them like the church is a hospital for broken people. And I said, I said, if you were perfect, we wouldn't need Christ. I said, that's the whole idea. Guess who he came for? I go, you. Guess who he hung out with? People just like you. And I said, look, man, it's a process. And I go, you don't go in the weight room and bench 405 on the first day, do you? No. I go, you ever get stuck? You ever get, freaking dump a freaking, squat rack and all this stuff? You ever do this or that? You ever get injured? Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with your faith. I go, it's a journey. It's a way to you're growing that spiritual muscle just like you would, your physical muscles. And like once you start making those correlations with the guys, they're like, oh, because they really do care. And but also at the same time, I think kids really like the challenge. Like they're like, if you kind of turn it into like, oh, all right, I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna grow. And you can kind of get into how do you grow, and different disciplines to help them. And you kind of come alongside them. And it's something that I tell them, hey, look, you're gonna come here to this university, and they're gonna get everything they can out of you. I go, while you're here, you need to get everything you can out of this university, which means an education. I go, here's an opportunity to work on your faith. I go, because I tell them all, I go, you're all going to be somebody's husband, father, leader, in that order. But I said, look, I go, what kind of husband, father, and leader are you going to be? And so, those are things that, I say, look, no one was a better leader than Christ. And I said, that's why we look to him many times is, how did he handle this? And so I try to bring them always back to Jesus to kind of use that as a backdrop. But, a lot of times, it's just kind of nice to have that, but like, it's never a Sunday school lesson and it's never shoved down their throat because they get it. Because it's overshadowed by the strain and by the action of the physical part of what I get to do too. So that's nice.
Well, it's so funny that you give the analogy of, if you were perfect, you wouldn't need Christ, right? Because what I say to our guys all the time is when they come in and everybody wants to be successful, right? So everybody,
Right.
like you said, wants to come in and squat 405 on the first day. And then, when they get frustrated and they don't see the progress that they want to see immediately, I tell them, well, if you were already that jacked, you wouldn't need me, right? I wouldn't get a paycheck, right? And it's
Right.
the exact same thing that you're saying there. So I love that analogy because again, these two things do fit together so well for me. And, just when I think about it, it makes complete sense. So to see it in action, obviously it's going to have a lot of really positive benefits and change people's lives, quite frankly. I guess I'm curious from a day-to-day basis, does this look like a lot of team talks? Is there Bible studies? Is it a lot of one-on-one talks, or is it kind of all of those three?
All those three. So like during the week, a lot of one-on-one talks. And it's most of the time it's guys coming to me. Like they'll come to me or like, and like you'll see somebody you know, who's just out of it. You go talk to him. I remember there was a kid 2 years ago. He was married and his wife had a miscarriage and like, things like that. You mean just there's all kinds of stuff. Money issues, family issues, whatever. And you just go over there. Sometimes you go over and talk to them, but they'll seek you out. And then we have Bible study every Tuesday night. And so we do Bible study and it's usually topical a lot of the time, but we try to make it like, how do you apply this to you today? Like, what did it look like back then? How does it apply to you today? And what can you do with this? And then there's also like, we have chapel services. So like they'll have me run a chapel and like, give a message. One of the like one that I always like to do is like, are you going to be ready? You're going to, how are you going to perform under pressure? Things like that. Like, and I don't, like there's, the disciples who ran with Jesus for 3 years, but, they're hanging out in the garden. The guy Peter cuts the dude's ear off, Malchus's ear off. And I'm like, man, you go back like one chapter before that, it says, pray for your enemies. And this guy's cutting his ear off, and I'm like, and it's just kind of like, you're going to be out on the field and it's going to be in the fourth quarter and it's going to be, hey, you're going to have to be able to cover this guy. And you better know the coverage. Cause if you're not, everyone's going to suffer. Like, so get your act together. It matters. And this is saying there's a correlation there. And so you have to be like, hey, you're accountable to something bigger than yourself. Like, get your crap together. You're not a kid anymore. If you're going to play here, if you're going to play on this team, we're serious. And like, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but it means you're responsible to do the best you can. And if you're not doing the best you can, we'll get somebody else in. I guarantee you that because we want to win. And you need to want to win enough that you're accountable to your friends. You need to be ready so you don't have to get ready type of deal. So it's
Yeah.
fun. There's all kinds of correlations you can use.
Well, seriously, and then I think about, our own football team here. We have the, I think it's like the can't get right board, and it's, okay, let's say you skipped reps. Obviously, that's you made a conscious decision to do that, right? But then let's say you hit, 7 reps when you're supposed to hit 8 and you just didn't really, focus on it, right? You get on the can't get right board because ultimately, like, it's the same thing on the field. It's, well, you thought you knew the play and you didn't know it. And then you blew the coverage. And like you said, everybody suffers. So it's really impressive to me to, again, so I'm physically doing it, right? Making the connections between these things because I can see just how well they fit together. I guess I'm a sucker for success stories and happy stories, and I like failures too. But is there any one story from your time at Ottawa that has really stuck out to you as a great success? Obviously, we don't have to get into super specifics, but anybody that kind of sticks out in your mind is like, wow, I'm really happy that I chose to do this.
Well, I think like one of the biggest things, like one of the ones that sticks out was when I first was starting. There was a kid Alex and his Samoan kid, and his dad died and unexpectedly. And I was like, and you know, he was kind of a mess, obviously. And Samoan culture, they're very, close, tight knit. And he played defense, so I went to the D coordinator. I said, "Hey man," I go, "if you want, I'll talk to Alex and kind of, talk to him a little bit. I go, I lost my dad, just not too long ago, unexpectedly. I can relate to him." And he's like, "Yeah." He goes, "That's all you, man." He goes, I don't want to, like, that's not my deal.
I'm good. You got it. Yeah.
You got it, coach. Go for it. And I was like, so I went up to him and we started talking, and I said, "Hey man," I said, "I'm really sorry about your dad. You know, like, I can kind of relate a little bit. My dad passed away." And he looked over at me. He goes, "Really?" And I go, "Yeah." And I go, "You want to know the best thing that someone did for me when my dad died?" And he goes, "What?" And I go, "Someone took me out for a steak dinner." I go, "What are you doing Friday?" So I took him out for a steak dinner. I think he ate like 2 steaks, like I said, I made a mistake, order whatever you want. He ordered everything. And like, but we started talking about his faith and how to, and grief, and kind of like how to, the legacy of his father, and, how he can, kind of honor that. And it was really nice, and talked and stuff. And he really made a big difference. And, he's, at the end of the night, he's crying and stuff. He's just, hugging you and all that junk. And anyway, and he was fine, for the most part. And so we have parents' night, and, I was like, "Oh man, Alex not going to have anybody here, like it's no dad, whatever." Well, I also forget that Samoan families are enormous. So like he had 40 people there, 40, 50 people. And like, I'm walking into the complex, and Alex is yelling at me. He goes, Coach Holmes. He goes, "Come here, come here, come here." He goes, "I want to introduce you to my mom." And so I walk up, to the stands, and he's like, "This is my mom." She goes, "Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you for taking care of my son. I really am happy to meet you, this and that. Coach Holmes, thank you so much." And then I hear this big, deep voice, "Coach Holmes." And there's like the 3 biggest men I've ever seen in my life. Their uncles are over here, and they overhear, they're like, "Oh, are you Coach Holmes?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're
if
like,
you want me to be, if not, I don't know.
"If not, should I say yes?" Like, and they, so they go, "Hey man," they go, "Thank you." They came over, freaking shook my hand, and were just so warm to me. They said, "Hey, thank you for taking care of our nephew. Like, it means a lot to us that you took care of Alex." And I was like, "Yeah, of course," and they go, "We can't tell you how much we really appreciate that." And I didn't realize, that was, such a bad, a thing. And after the game, they're all together, and everybody has a lathe and all that junk. And like, and they're doing a family photo, and he says, "Coach," he goes, "Come here." He goes, "Get in the photo." And so, some Hallie in the middle of all these, polys, and, yeah, it was like, I thought about it, and I was like, a lot of times people think about like struggle or death or something like that as bad. And like, how could it ever be good? And what I think is kind of cool about an opportunity to coach the way we coach is that all our opportunities can be opportunities to pour good into people, because you have a choice. You can use it and define yourself by it and be bitter and stuff like that, or you can use it to bring light into a situation. And that's all we're called to do in the Christian faith, is bring light into very dark situations. And there's nothing more dark than death. And so that's where I was like, I'm sitting there in the middle of all these people, and I'm like, man, my dad would be laughing his head off. He's like, "How'd you end up there?" And so that's kind of like one that sticks out. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that sticks out, but that one was really special to me because it was so close to when my own dad died. So that's a good one.
Yeah, no, that's an amazing story, seriously. And, I think you say, like, in dark situations, trying to bring light, I think that's just so important. And the beauty of coaching to me is the making those connections, right? And then, like you said, you try to be there as much as possible, but sometimes you never really know the full impact that you had. So those moments where you can kind of see, okay, wow, I really did help this person in this situation, not in a pat on the back way, but just in a like, thank goodness that I'm doing what I've set out to do, right? You didn't become the strength chaplain just to come on the Samson podcast and say,
No.
I'm jacked and I'm a strength chaplain, right? Like, you did this because you want to continue to introduce people to your faith. You want to continue to be the light in other people's lives. And it's a really cool story to just hear about how that actually came to fruition. So I really appreciate you sharing that with us. I
Yeah,
guess
of
my
course.
I guess my next question for you is, you're obviously a very influential man in other people's lives. Who have been the most influential men in your life?
Oh, that's I've had a lot of influential guys and a lot of father figures. Someone that everybody will know on this podcast is Jeff Madden, Coach Madden.
Absolutely. It was a
Yeah,
leading question, if I'm being honest, because I knew it would come to
yeah,
this. So I wanted to get to this story for sure. So please
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. Mad Dog's he's a very important person in my life. I met him when I was between my freshman and sophomore year, and I was getting recruited by a guy named Coach Gregory, and um I went to a camp, and they took us in the weight room, and I knew a little bit about lifting, but I didn't know nothing. And I saw the biggest, baddest man I ever thought I saw. I was like, who is this guy? And I was like, man, this guy he seems to know a lot, and like command the room. And I was like a little in awe. I was like, man, well, if anybody knows how to play college football and how to get here, that guy does. Well, anyway, they dismissed us to go eat, and I didn't go. And I like stayed in the weight room, and I waited for everybody to leave, and I saw where his office was. So I knocked on the door, and I'll do my best, Coach Madden. And yes. And he's like,
Pretty good.
and
That's pretty good.
I poked my head. I was like, Coach Madden. He's like, yeah, what do you need, son? And I was like, can I talk to you? And he's like, come in. He goes, sit down. And so I asked him, hey, what do you got to do to play college football? I go, what do I got to do? And that guy stopped his entire day and for 45 minutes talked to me about college athletics, strength and conditioning, speed training. He's just and just a mindset of like, hey, whenever you think you're good enough, you're not. Like you think you're fast, you're not. You think you're strong, you're not. There's always somebody down the street who's going to be stronger. I remember he even asked me, he looked at me and you drink and do drugs? And I was like, no. I was like, here, whoa, and he goes, well, don't start. And he started rambling off about how, you work out for 2 days or something like that. And then you go get trashed. He goes, you're going to waste those 2 days or something like that. And I was like, man, this guy, I was just like eating up everything he was saying. And what he did was he gave me their off-season training manual. He goes, here, take this home and follow it. He goes, do everything it says. He goes, this will help you become better for next year. He goes, do everything it says. And I took it home and I like laminated it and like was like my own little notes. I was doing all this stuff and like, man, I followed that thing to a T, and he was right. Made me a better athlete. It got me into strength and conditioning, got me into seeing that like, hey, you have some control over the effort you put in, and what kind of effort you put in matters. And that's where strength and conditioning and coaches and things like that matter. And so anyway, we had lost contact, and this was about, I want to say 7-8 years ago. I was at the CSCCA and I go, Coach Madden. And he kind of looked over and he goes, do I know you? And I was like, I know you. And he goes, you do? And I said, yeah. And I reminded him of that story. And he looked over at me and he goes, and, he kind of was like, you're not going to believe this. And I go, what? And he goes, I was praying in the morning that God would give me a sign on me staying in this business. And he goes, I think you're that sign. And and it was like out of nowhere, and it was kind of one of those like coincidences that like, just at the right time, right thing. And so he's been very instrumental in like the whole Strength Chaplain thing and encouraging me, and you know, definitely is encouraging me to take it even further into speaking and things like that. But like, he was huge. He was huge. Like, I would have never developed into the athlete, and then that, transcribed into coaching and stuff, without him. Like, just that 45-minute time, like, he took his time, and that I'll never forget that. Time is the most valuable thing we own. It's the commodity of life. And for him to take time, because I wasn't anything. I was not a top recruit at, like, between my freshman. I was the nobody. He's probably like, kid, you're lost. Go to lunch.
Yeah, you need to figure out where you're supposed to go.
Yeah, you're not even in the right spot. But no, it made a huge difference.
Well, I think that's such a cool story because like you spoke about with Alex on your side, right? You were the coach in that situation, right? Coach Madden was on the opposite side of that for you personally growing up. And then again, it's what's really cool about coaching to me. And, the paths that are laid out for us is you get to meet people who change your life and you don't really know, until later on that ultimately somebody really impacted somebody. And so it's so cool for me to hear that and see that. I'm cracking up at him asking you if you drink or do drugs, because I remember he came on our podcast as kind of the legacy series that we did, and he told the story about when they lost the national championship and then came back the next year and won it. And I said, well, what was the difference between those two? And the first one, he goes, well, we were out drinking the night before, the first one, he goes, and the second one, we figured it out, and so it's just funny. It cracks me up because you want to talk about a man who's true to himself. I mean, that guy has got it down to a T. So it's so cool for me to hear about that experience.
Oh yeah. And he's the same guy now as he was back then. That's what I love about him, is like, he's a consistent guy. And I think that's that's real leadership, is if you have a guy you see is what you get. And like, that's someone you can trust. And like, he's just been a great mentor to me. So like, he'd be up there on the top list. But
that's awesome.
And like, like I said, I've been blessed with guys, I have a, real strong, guy who's been discipling me for, 20 years. Stan Murdoch, there's my godfather, and that's a very interesting man. He's probably the man I fear the most, but love the most. And he's a dangerous man. Like, he's got like probably 40 years in policing, work with like, on the national level, and, worked in special weapons and tactics, just an interesting man. And, also, taught at the university, things like that, just a kind of a Renaissance man. But like, my mom used to call him my godfather, because she said, hey, he's the only guy outside your own dad that I trust you with. And he's the guy who taught me judo and jujitsu. And he came from the old school. And so it was like rough, like a little rougher than normal. And so, but I remember we'd go to the police training academy or training center, and they had a really nice mat room. It was patterned after the Kodokan. It was like a bouncy floor, all new mats. We're the only ones there, and we're just training. And so it was like 3 hours of training on a Sunday. So it was like an hour and 15 minutes of judo, hour and 15 minutes of jiu-jitsu. And then he had something called street technique. And it was like, I go, what's that? He's like, remember, we don't do this in the dojo with our friends. This is all for the street. And I was like, what do you mean the street? He goes, you get attacked. And I was like, oh, okay, this is real. And he's like, oh yeah, this is real. This is how you're gonna really screw somebody up. And I was like, okay. But it was like, and he would say, now don't do this to your friends. He goes, you'll get kicked out of a tournament, and you get kicked out, clubs and stuff. And I was like, okay. And one day, like, my mom would always call me on Sundays, and she'd say, well, what did you and Steve learn today? What did Steve teach you today? And I said, oh, we did some judo, we did some jujitsu, and then we did something called street technique. And she's like, and she knew after a while, street technique was always part of the lesson plan. And she goes, well, what'd you learn today? And I said, well, we learned how to pistol whip somebody. And and it's just me and him, it's just me and Steve. And And she goes, and I go, and I was all excited because I was young. I was like, oh yeah, it's a figure eight thing on his face. And she's like, and I'm all excited. And she's like, there's just silence on the other end, my mother. And like, she's like, hmm. And then all of a sudden, after this big long pause, she goes, well, Steve thinks it's important to know. I guess it's important to know. She goes, and I was just like, and I was like, okay, he's like the one guy that could teach me that. My mom would be okay with it.
Yeah, that
But
trust runs deep.
oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that guy, yeah. So, but he's a guy that real strong Christian faith. I think that's a big thing that between him and a lot of the guys that I ran with, and God blessed me with being in my life. And that's something I try to portray to these guys is like, because you have faith in Christ, a lot of times people think Christianity is, kind of like soft and kind of weak and not weak, but kind of like, like the Ned Flanders type of guy off of Simpson or something,
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, it's actually the opposite. These are the guys who are like probably taking on some of the toughest lifestyle challenges of all guys. And, bringing like, hey, this is what you're going to face as a guy, and, this is how are you going to handle it? How tough are you going to be? And, I had a background doing some prison ministry for a stint. And like, that was the thing is like everybody, if you was respect and toughness. And how do you define toughness? And it's like, it's not always taking the easy way out. And the easy way out is fighting, drinking, a lot of times it's like doing the hard thing is being tough. And so that's one of the biggest things that we try to teach is like, what does it mean to be tough spiritually as well? So all these guys who were influences to me were all very tough men. So that really helped.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so cool to me to kind of, we worked a little bit backwards, right, from how we got there, right? But then to see how you were mentored and then how you're able to mentor people in the future, it's all about giving back and being that person for others too. So I've really enjoyed just kind of being able to hear about your life story and about what you do. And truly, I challenge somebody else to find another strength chaplain in the world. I just don't think they'll be able to do it. I just think it's such a cool profession.
Well, if they do, then we could start a club because like I
There
only
you
know
go.
of one, but I think there's a lot of great guys out there. Like they're probably strength chaplains. They don't know that's the title. So like there's a lot of good strength coaches out there trying to do the right thing and bring Christ into the weight room as much as they can, and it's a blessing. It's really humbling to tell you the truth, like, cause you're responsible for a lot of guys and you're trying to, there's days you're like, man, you're having a rough day yourself, but like, you just kind of like, hey man, it's not about you. And you got to like, you got to look at it like, if you don't do it, who's going to do it? And, I kind of look at it like that, it's important. It's not about me. It's not about how I feel about it. It's about, if you don't reach that kid, then maybe nobody will. And so, and you never know where someone's coming from. So if you can bring some light into their world, it really does matter, I think. So it's been a blessing to me, and it's something I would have never guessed doing. I mean, I always talked to the AD and I said, man, you wouldn't recognize me 5 years ago. I was like running cattle. And I was like, yeah, not at
That's
all.
awesome. I
Yeah, I
mean, but
would
it's
have
just
never thought.
incredible
Yeah.
what it's morphed into. And, again, I just think it's so cool to see again the connections between your faith and what you're able to do with these athletes. And I think it's just a very uplifting story for me. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. Like it's just cool for me to do these podcasts because it kind of reinvigorates my, love for coaching. And it just shows me, what other people are doing out in the universe. It's just very cool for me to see. So I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. I guess the final piece that I kind of want to mention for you too is that you've kind of talked about diving into public speaking just a little bit, and if anybody's listening and was curious about how to get in contact with you or, what you could possibly do, what would be the best way to follow up?
Well, probably, obviously email me or, get a hold of me through Inform Sport. But, what I could do is I can, obviously give you my contact information. That way we can have it for anybody who's interested. But Yeah, like that's, again, like Coach Madden, he's the guy who's pushing me real hard for that. He's like, "Hey, you got a good message that is, tailored for guys." And I think there's a need. What's interesting about guys these days is they're facing stuff that I didn't face. And, I think we talked about this at the CSCCA. Like, you kind of have a really interesting uh, time in the world where you have, guys like when I grew up, and I'll give you some examples. When I grew up, I had like 30 people in my class because I came a small town in Nebraska. And so let's say half of those were girls. Let's say there's 12 girls or something like that. Well, there's a good 5 of them you don't want to date because they're ugly. So you got, so that kind of brings that pool down even smaller. So you have to like learn to communicate. You have to learn to talk. You have to learn to listen. You have to learn to pick up on cues like, oh, she likes strawberry ice cream, or she likes, this is, important to her, or whatever. You have to listen. Because if you want to date, or you want to, have a girlfriend, you're going to have to figure that out. But if you can't communicate, then whatever. But today, the attention span is like so small. The communication skills have gone down because they're always picking up the phone and stuff, and it's scrolling through things. I watch them. I'm like, man, these guys, this is like, I was like, you guys have horrible communication skills. And like, but the other thing too is like you have now like dating apps, where like you can just swipe left and there's like unlimited number of women available. So I don't have to really concentrate on anybody. If that, oh well, swipe left, I'll get another one. And so that's kind of weird. And then the other thing too is like the women who are out there have a kind of a false sense of reality, because like they're looking at social media and they're seeing guys who have like an 8-pack or a 10-pack and they're like 6'4" or whatever, and like they're driving a Ferrari or a sports car, and they're making $500,000 a year. I'm like, do you know how many guys there are that are like that? Like it's so small, like if any, and like, and so a lot of times guys are getting pushed back against with like, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I'm an assistant strength coach. Oh, well, okay. Like, it's kind of like, and then they kind of feel like, well, I'm not even going to try. And then, another thing that and this is like what guys tell me. And so like the other thing that's interesting too is, and I don't, we don't have to get into this too heavy, but like the rise of pornography. Like, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of guys who struggle with that. And, in the old days, people got married because like, man, they were lusting. They were like, hey man, I gotta get married. I've gotta start making some kids or something. Like, what am I, I gotta do something about this. But now you have kind of a virtual Novocaine. You can get, pick your poison, and you can kind of subdue those urges. And so what does that do? It does a lot of things internally in the head, but it also does a lot of things with their communication skills and how they see sex and women and all that stuff. And like, it's kind of like, it kind of warps it a little bit. And it also delays, again, like where's that, intimate communication, and that can fall into like a marriage, can fall into all kinds of issues. And so I look at that, and these kids are just bombarded by it. They're bombarded by all that stuff. And what I find probably more often than not is that there's a lot of anxiety. They already have anxiety because they want to play all the time. They want to be the starter. And then the other thing too is they have anxiety about their self-worth. And so my biggest thing is that they walk away from me knowing that they're worth more than their spot on the team. As a person, like they have value. And if they have that, then you can start from there and build a base.
And so these are things that you can speak about with other teams too,
Oh
and
yeah,
that's where,
yeah.
the public speaking piece can be so big is, obviously Ottawa's very lucky to have you, but you can be rented out for possibly an hour at a time and
Yeah.
talk with people about these communication issues because it is a big issue, so I'm really glad that that's your mission because I see it happen where I am. And I think it's a common theme that a lot of us have seen as coaches.
Well, and that's the other thing too. Sports is such a cool thing because it brings all kinds of people together, but it's also such a cool opportunity because you have such influence for, a concentrated time. And if you can bring such good things out of that influence, besides, wins are a good thing, but like, you know what, there's always another game, and so like, but if you have long-term wins with the person individually, I think that matters a huge, that's just taking advantage of the situation.
No doubt. Absolutely. I think that's all we look for, right? Is,
Yeah.
kind of like you said, the short term wins are a little bit more exciting, maybe, but the long term wins are what really keeps driving us and keeps us going. So
Yeah,
I
definitely.
think it's fantastic. Well, Andy, thank you so much, man. Seriously, this has been one of my favorite episodes. It was really great to speak with you and get to know you more and hear about your journey and what you do and what you put out in the world. So thank you. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show.
Well, man, I can't thank you enough for letting me on here because I'm like, man, nobody wants to hear what I'm doing. Like,
No,
but
I think you'd be surprised. Seriously.
yeah, well, I really do appreciate it, and it's a great opportunity, and I just appreciate you, being having an interest in putting it out there. So, thanks. Would love to do it again if you ever needed me.
Yeah, we've actually been bringing some guests on that we've had on previously. So I can say that we, will possibly have the opportunity to do it again too, which I would love to do.
Awesome, awesome. Thanks, man.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it.